Well, despite Theresa May's Brexit checkers plan being in intensive care when she left Downing Street, her and her team had high hopes for the Salzburg summit. But effectively, what the EU have done is sign a do not resuscitate order. And I think we're seeing on the front pages of the British newspapers just how badly this went for her. Humiliation, a disaster. These are the words, the headlines are branding it. And the EU, and Theresa May's team actually were giving all the signs that they were going with sort of a belief that things had changed, that the words that Michel Barnier's had been saying publicly in the past fortnight, a softening of the language, would mean that there'd be some kind of agreement on the checkers plan. And indeed, in a BBC documentary earlier this week, they recorded the preparations the Prime Minister's team were making to go to Salzburg. Her Brexit advisor, Ollie Robbins, was caught on camera saying that the checkers plan had been a game changer, that there were good signs around Europe that they were coming around to it. Theresa May herself thought that the direct approach she'd taken, going around the EU and over the head of Michel Barnier, having those one-to-one meetings with fellow EU leaders through the summer, had meant that when it came to this meeting, they would be more receptive and that they'd get another summit to agree everything in November. But in the end, the only other EU leader that signaled that they were in favour of it was someone that isn't really that helpful, the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who himself is having difficulties with the EU and is somewhat of a pariah at this conference. So Theresa May comes back here to Downing Street, and some are saying it might well be time to call the priest, because her plans really do now seem to have been left in tatters, really.
Well, her plans left in tatters. And what about herself? Where does this leave Theresa May and her political future?
Well, there was always two fights for Theresa May. There was the EU side and then there was the home side. Now, even though there is rebellion among her ranks on the checkers plans, she thought that going to Salzburg, getting the EU to signal that they were in favour and accept the checkers plan, meant that she could come back here, go to her party conference in just over a week's time and say to them, the EU has accepted my plan, you need to fall in line behind me, vote this through for the country. But now we're hearing from Brexit Secretary David Davis that he thinks that there are enough votes within the Conservative Party and with Labour likely to vote against, that the checkers plan won't now be able to get through Parliament. So Theresa May is in real difficulty, and I think she knows this, because yesterday was one of the only times we've really seen her be visibly angry while she was Prime Minister. There was one press conference last year in the snap election where a policy she had, the so-called dementia tax, was picked apart by the assembled journalists, and she got angry and yelled, "Nothing has changed." Well, that was very much like that yesterday from Theresa May. She looked visibly annoyed. She said that she was ready to walk away on a no-deal scenario. And I think Theresa May and her team come back here now to Downing Street. They'll be having crisis meetings to try to figure out a way through. But as it stands, with the EU remaining firm on this, and Chris Grayling, the government minister, has said they still need to change their take on Northern Ireland and the plans there. But really, the government knows now and that they're in a very difficult position. I think we'll see a bit more splits in the cabinet, and Theresa May will need to come up with a new plan pretty quick.
Vincent McAviney in London, thanks so much for joining us. And for more on the European perspective, we're joined by Damon Embling, who's standing by in Brussels. Damon, so tell us what's happening from the EU side. What are EU leaders doing?
Well, Theresa May went to Salzburg to this summit. Of course, Salzburg, the home of Mozart, where Mozart was born. But this certainly wasn't a masterpiece moment for Theresa May, or in fact, the European Union. Theresa May had gone to this dinner on Wednesday night with some hope, at least, that she could persuade European leaders to back that now infamous checkers plan, her plan for future trade, and to try and avoid that hard border in Ireland with Northern Ireland, which has proved to be the fundamental sticking point in these negotiations, and continues to be the fundamental sticking point as we talk today. These EU leaders really round on Theresa May in Salzburg. The EU Council President Donald Tusk saying that her Brexit plan was just not workable and it ran the risk of undermining the European single market. The European single market, Isabel, is a fundamental thing for the European Union. It's this much cherished baby, and it's not going to have anybody that's going to threaten that in the future. So that's why it's protecting it so much. Theresa May is saying that this Brexit plan she has, the Chequers plan, is the only credible option on the table. But Emmanuel Macron, as we was hearing in my report a little bit earlier, was saying, well, we can't have this as a take it or leave it situation. He criticised Theresa May's stance on that. And he also went further, the French president, by saying all those people that have been saying, well, we can do without Europe, we don't need it, we can profit away from it. He called them liars. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, of course, at this summit as well. She's saying substantial progress now needs to be made over the coming weeks as time runs out to try and seal this Brexit deal. Both sides, of course, saying they're ready for a no-deal scenario. But Isabel, they don't really want that. They have too much at stake.
And, that does beg the question, where do things go from here?
Very good question, Isabel. I've never seen politics become so interesting here in Brussels. They have this summit coming up here in Brussels in October, which had been the original informal deadline, really, to try and strike this Brexit agreement when EU leaders come together. Whether that's now going to happen, whether the hole is going to be closed, I think it's too big right now to close, is a big question. If they do get closer to striking an agreement and they can agree on these fundamental points in October, then they have said that there'll be a special Brexit summit coming up in November when they could hopefully sign any deal off. But of course, Isabel, that's not the end of the process. It then has to go to the Parliament in the UK. We've heard about all of the divisions that are going on there from my colleague Vincent in London. And also it has to go before the European Parliament to be ratified. And if there's any slippage in time now, just a matter of days or a matter of weeks, it really is going to put that divorce day next March in jeopardy. People have described this divorce, Isabel, as the mother of all divorces. I think I now describe it as the grandmother of all divorces.